Tariffs. In 2018, President Donald Trump imposed a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminum imports. In addition to these, Trump would hit China with a $200 billion tariff on all Chinese imports. This would be a trade policy unlike anything his predecessors had done before. But what even is a tariff? Essentially, it's a special tax enforced by governments on goods coming into a country and goods going out. Because of global trade, countries typically have excess goods that they produce and are willing to share those goods with other countries. When this goes well, you have global free trade that benefits everybody. And when they don't, this special tax can be used as a weapon to punish countries or as a means to promote domestic growth. Either way, this special tax has an effect on us all, from local to global. And in this video, we're going to do a deep dive into how these tariffs work, how this special tax changes the way our dollars are spent. But I want to look at this from 3 different angles. That way we can get the full picture from the perspective of the consumer, and then the small businesses, and finally as an investor.
The president says tariffs will benefit U.S. manufacturing.
A warning to world leaders from President Trump.
Come make your product in America, but if you don't make your product in America, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff.
Trump's hard line on trade policy creating deep concern within his own party. Retaliatory tariffs in Canada, Mexico, and China will go into effect this week.
Billions and billions.
Okay, so let's take a quick minute to understand the history of tariffs. Like, where did this tactic come from, this idea? And I want to try to get to this quickly so that we can get to the good stuff. But to understand this, we have to go back, like way back, to ancient Greece in Athens. Athenians needed a system to raise taxes for the Athenian government. So in typical government fashion, the Athenians put a levy on key imports. Obviously, grain was one of the biggest imports that went through the port at the time. A levy of 2% was put on goods arriving in the market through the docks. But that's not where it stops. They also placed restrictions on money lending, as well as enforcing that the transport of grain had to come to the port of Piraeus. They were like, no, there's no way around it. You're going to pay this tax. Fast forward to 1721, when the UK pretty much changed the game when it came to tariffs and protectionism. They began to pursue a strategy of large-scale infant industry development. Basically, they cut off all outside trade to promote the growth of industries that are not so developed in their own country. Countries do this to become a greater competitor in the global landscape. This was led by Robert Walpole, who introduced policies to promote manufacturing goods. These policies would continue on throughout the century, and they worked. Not only did Britain's manufacturing industry catch up with the rest of the world, they surpassed most countries. All right, so let's take things to the US. In 1789, the Congress of the Confederation was having a tough time imposing tariffs or even reaching reciprocal trade agreements with most European powers. This was at the beginning of our country, so we obviously were still trying to figure things out. This created a situation where the US was unable to prevent a flood of European goods, which were damaging domestic manufacturers, even while Britain and other countries placed high tariffs on US goods. So the US was getting a little bullied. And then one James Madison stepped in and implemented the Tariffs Act of 1789. The act imposed a 50 cents per ton duty on imported goods and a 6 cents per ton duty on goods imported by American ships. These tariffs were imposed on goods like steel, ships, tobacco, salt, and cloth. Okay, so that's a brief history. Now let's talk about how this affects you, the consumer. So tariffs tend to be regressive. And no, I'm not just talking jargon just to go over your head. This is basically economists' way of saying when things like tariffs happen, it's the people with the least to spare that feel it first. So if you're already struggling to take care of basic necessities, you feel the squeeze even tighter. It can be a type of inflation in itself. So let's look at this concretely. Let's say a company makes a product, call it a phone case. Originally, it cost them $10 to make, and they sell it to you for $20, and they profit $10. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, let's introduce what this looks like when tariffs are included. The production price of this same phone case goes up to $14. Now the company's profit margins drop down to $6 and they begin to lose money. So what's the next logical step? Raise the price of the phone case. So now that $20 price turns into $28. That's a cost passed on to you. The fashion industry sees this played out in what's called pink tariffs. The way this works is that women typically pay 3% more than men in tariffs for consumer goods, meaning in products like women's razors versus men's razors, even pink teddy bears versus blue teddy bears. It's kind of crazy. In 2018, women shelled out an extra $2 billion in tariffs compared to men. On average, households can expect to spend an extra $2,500 to $7,600 a year when tariffs are implemented. And that's not just talking about high-end items. We're talking about everyday stuff like clothes, toys, furniture, appliances. That toaster that was $40, it's now $48. A $50 pair of shoes, try $60. All right, so that's the consumer. Now what about businesses? Particularly small businesses. Small businesses make up about 43.5% of the US economy, so almost half. But surprisingly, tariffs positively impact these businesses. They cause consumers to buy locally, in turn boosting the overall economy, especially businesses like manufacturing companies. Companies like Eder Manufacturing Co., known for producing US flags, will be in a better position to compete against international manufacturers like China, who produces the same flags. Which, by the way, does anybody else think that that's kind of weird? American flags made in China, our biggest rival. I don't know. Anyway, companies that have most of their work outsourced in countries like China and Mexico would move their operations to the US. This type of shift creates a ripple effect where small businesses that support these giants, like IT providers, local restaurants, and logistic firms, reap the benefits too. But not every business feels this positivity. Industries like import businesses will feel the brunt of tariffs as the costs to bring goods in go up. This would likely cause those businesses to find new suppliers in other countries like Vietnam. Tariffs often cause retaliatory effects. In 2018, when the US imposed steel and aluminum tariffs, the EU responded with tariffs on 180 US products, totaling out to $3 billion. Now, not every product gets hit with tariffs. Some actually do get exemptions. An estimated $2 billion worth of items during that 2018 tariff won exemptions, including Bibles, which is awesome, and chemicals used in fracking. The latter was strategically exempted to maintain America's energy dominance. Okay, we've covered a lot. But lastly, let's look at how tariffs impact investors. And if you've made it this far and you're like, I don't care about investing or investors, I get it. Now's the time. You can click off. Industries like solar and steel have historically taken hits from tariffs in the past. Going back to the tariffs during the 2018 Trump administration, when there was a 30% tariff on solar panels and a 50% tariff on washing machines, both solar and steel companies underperformed the S&P 500 until mid-2019. So that's the direct impact that it would have. But these are the potentials we face when talks of this tactic, this idea begins. But after everything, the question is, how will you let it affect you?